Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of the Fifth Meeple Board Game Podcast. We are a group of diverse friends who offer our takes on the latest and greatest board games to hit our table. I'm your host, Chris, the intellectual introvert, and I'm joined today by the collector.
Hey, this is David.
And once again, the guest host.
I'm back again. This is Pete.
In today's episode, we are working some things out, exploring a pair of worker placement games that don't actually have restrictions on placement. We start in service of the king, gathering materials, hiring apprentices, and building glorious structures in Architects of the West Kingdom. But then, life takes a turn for the worse as we find ourselves inside one of those buildings, acting as ringleaders to our prison posse in Lockup, a role-player tale. And finally, because we just can't help ourselves, we'll determine which game gets the top placement as we face them off against each other in our ultimate showdown, the Battle of the Funnest. But while we gather up our workers, David, what's our topic of discussion for today?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about something, it's not exactly board games, but it's about how we put them back in the box. Would you guys ever spend money on board game custom inserts so that the game could be put away nicely? I know this is kind of a debate that's raging kind of in the board gaming world about, when you get a game, especially if it's a Kickstarter or something else, do you expect nice packaging to put it back in the box? Because sometimes you can get it out, but you can't always get it back in, the right way. So what are your guys' thoughts on, A, have you ever bought, a custom insert? And then B, if you haven't, would you consider spending money on something like that?
Custom inserts for me, I think they're great, especially if they add to setting up the game quickly and organizing it, putting it away. A lot of the Kickstarters that I got in games come with those inserts or great game systems where you can, again, just pull it out and play the game. You pull the lid off and you're ready to go. I've considered buying some for games I have already, but I haven't done that yet. I hate using bags, but that seems to be the easiest thing. The other challenging thing is when you get one of those inserts, if it holds the components really good, sometimes it doesn't work when you turn them on the side. I know, David, I'm looking at your collection here, and most of them are the vertical, not the horizontal, but some games are just so heavy with all the components. I don't like storing them that way, so I'm kind of one of those guys who mixes it up. But as far as the inserts inside of them, I'm okay pulling out the original stuff that came with it. At first, when I got into the gaming hobby, I was like, oh, I got to keep the original box, and now they're gone. You get to that point where it's more functional just to put everything in the box, especially with expansions too. You start loading it up, and there's just not enough room for it. So that's what I'm at.
Yeah, so with those expansions that you put into one box, Pete, do you keep the expansion box or do you throw those ones away? This is actually another great topic.
Yeah, I still keep the boxes. I box them within boxes and boxes. And then I also keep some of the original components when I bling out my game. So I have a box that has all of those components in there, all the extra cardboard money and things like that. So I do keep them. I've considered maybe making wall art out of them. I know some people have done that, but I still keep them. I think I've thrown away maybe one or two, but really, really small expansion boxes.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. It's hard for me to throw anything away. Going to Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have never spent money on a custom insert, probably because I have my own way of storing things. Sometimes I use bags, but for the most part, I get a lot of the little plastic containers that are cubic or whatever the term would be for rectangular plastic container. And I just have a bunch of different sizes, and they pack nicely into the box. A lot of times they don't fit in the box if I don't do it right. Architects that we're going to talk about today is very tight. When I put them in those kind of containers, brass is pretty tight, but usually I find a way to get them in there. But I mean, a lot of times those custom inserts are more than the game, or at least as much as the game. I can't do that. I feel like maybe that's the reason why all these companies make such terrible inserts to begin with, is they got some kind of deal with these folks that put those out there. Because that's the other thing that could be a whole topic of itself, is that a lot of the inserts that come to the game, it's like, why are you wasting my time with this plastic that doesn't work? Even the ones that are supposed to be, or that I've seen, or some people say, oh, this is a great insert. Lords of Waterdeep. for example, a lot of people say, oh, it's such a great insert. And I tried it for like the first 2 plays. And then I just found it was just a pain in the butt to try to get everything back in there, and just as easy for me to just put them in those containers I talked about. And like you said, no matter how good that insert is, you store it on the side, or it doesn't end up being flat for a little bit, and everything's everywhere anyway.
Yeah, I trashed my Lords of Waterdeep insert. It cracked, and you're trying to put those in there, and just putting them in, they're hard to pull out, and yeah, it just wasn't worth it. Just throw them in a bag.
I kept my Lords of Waterdeep insert for a little while, and then I, like you were talking with boxes, and I do have all my boxes when I combine them, but I had a stack of inserts until I looked and I was like, my gosh, Chris, you have a problem. And I just got rid of all of them, and now I'm more comfortable with just that insert. I've decided I don't like them, and I'd just rather have them in containers. You get them out and you just put them where you need to, and you can even work out them, and that works better for me.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with both of you. I've never actually spent any money on a custom insert myself. I've been gifted some of them, I think a folded space one and something else. But when I went to go actually look at how to do it, it was like I actually had to put it together. And I was like, I don't know if I have the time to go put it together. I'd rather be playing a game. So I actually still have the insert. It looks really nice. I just haven't built it. So I didn't know you had to build them. I thought I was like, if I'm going to spend extra money, I'd hope they come pre-assembled. But they always don't do that. But I also think that kind of what Pete had mentioned, I think of Dwellings of Everdale. When we play that game, that you take it out and you put the tray in front of you, and that tray is actually the functional tray that you're using for the game board. And I think if more companies did that, I think that would be way better, just because it helps cut down the setup time. And anything that could help cut down the setup time, I think is beneficial. So to me, I'm always looking for a company that is doing that. I mean, would it sway you guys to buy a game that you knew had nice like custom inserts that came with it, that it wasn't necessarily priced that way, but you're like, hey, this game has it. I know it has great trays. I pull it out and try to rock.
I don't know that it influences my decision in buying the game. I look at the game itself. If it's something that I want to buy, I don't get swayed too much anymore about what might come with it. Again, you guys know I love my, extra good components, but it's not going to change my opinion. If it's a good game, it's a good game. I want to play the game. One of the other things, though, that is an option is also 3D printing. Chris, I know you've done some of that. I do know there's some nice custom inserts that you can just 3D print, which, again, may be a more cost-effective way of managing your the game inside. And
I have not printed any full inserts, but I have printed some things relatively recently. For example, Castles of Burgundy that has all the hex tiles. I printed out something that just stores all of those, and so you bring them out all together. You put them in there. They're not all over the place, but it's just a nice little hex-shaped sectioned piece that then holds those in place, but doesn't fill the entire box or anything like that. Which then, if I get other things, I don't have to worry about, well, gee, does this insert work with these other things that I might want to do with it?
Okay, great, guys. I appreciate your discussion on this topic, and we'd love to hear more from you, too. If you're out there and you have an opinion on this, feel free to hit us up on social media or even send us an email, and we might even read it on the air.
Yeah, thanks, David. So by all means, everyone out there, if you're listening, let us know what you think. Send us an email at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com. We'd love to have you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or on BGG, or again, check out our website at thefifthmeeple.com. And before you forget, why not take a second to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a show. David mentioned leaving a review. If you do leave a review out there, we will probably read it on the show. In fact, David, I believe we had one come in recently.
Yeah, we definitely had a couple reviews come in recently, and one of them actually wrote something too with the review on Apple Podcasts. So we'll go ahead and read it here live. It's from Board Game Gal, board being spelled B-O-R-E-D, kind of clever there. And the title is Great Chemistry. It says, these guys have great chemistry together and seem like they really enjoy making this podcast. I especially love the battle intros for the games, LOL. My favorite part is that they give great summaries of how to play the games. So if you hate learning to play new games like I do, this podcast is for you. So thank you to Board Game Gal out there for that great review.
Always appreciate a nice review, especially when it's got nice things to say. And I will say that with respect to those battle intros and the game intros, those are a lot of fun to put together too. And so especially the battle intros, I know I have a lot of fun just coming up, okay, what's the next pun I'm going to use, or how can I work alliteration in here? The thesaurus gets a workout when I'm trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to say there? So, but by all means, thanks for that feedback. Always appreciate it.
Yeah. Did you used to be a rapper in a second life, Chris?
Maybe someday. Maybe someday I'll use this microphone a little bit differently. Yeah.
So thanks to Board Game Gal for leaving that review. And if you too also enjoy our podcast, we'd love to have you guys review us on whatever you're listening to, especially Apple Podcasts. That would be great. It would help us in our search results and help us to get more listeners. So we appreciate all the great feedback we're getting, and thank you for listening.
All right, well, we need to go grab our drafting tools, but when we return, we'll get into our thoughts on Architects of the West Kingdom. Architects of the West Kingdom is a 1 to 5 player worker placement and contract fulfillment game that places you in the service of the king, constructing various landmarks throughout his domain. Each player controls 20 workers, placing 1 per turn at one of many available spaces. Many locations can accommodate any number of workers, including several of your own. In fact, the more workers you place at a particular location, the larger the benefit. Some locations provide resources: clay, gold, wood, stone, or money. Another allows you to exchange goods, and yet another you can rob the tax stand. Alternatively, you can visit the black market, reducing your virtue, but getting a really great deal. At the town center, you can round up other players' workers, eventually dropping them off at the guardhouse to get your reward. At the workshop, you can use your money to hire apprentices, or you can draft architectural plans. And finally, you can visit the guild hall, exchanging your resources to construct buildings or even advance construction of the glorious cathedral, increasing your virtue in the process. Play continues until a predetermined number of build actions have been taken, after which everyone gets one final turn before the king makes his assessment. Players then earn or lose points for the buildings they've constructed, as well as their endgame bonuses, their assistance on the cathedral, their position on the virtue track, the remaining gold and marble, unpaid debts, and workers remaining in prison. The player with the most points earns the king's favor and a spot at the top of the cathedral. Architects of the West Kingdom was designed by Shem Phillips and S.J. McDonald and was first published in 2019 by Garfield Games. So all right, everyone, here we are in the Carolinian Empire in the 9th century, trying our best to please the king. What are some of the best things about being an architect here in the West Kingdom?
Worker placement games are some of my favorite mechanics. I looked at my top 10 games or top 20 games that I looked at, and about half of them are actually worker placements. To me, worker placement is like the Swiss Army knife of board gaming. You can do so many different things with a worker placement. When you place your worker out, there's so many different options that you have with Architects of the West Kingdom. There's locations that you can go to that will get you money or resources. You can take other actions which allow you to pull your workers back and even capture other opponents' meeples and bring them back to your board, or then send them to the prison, which is kind of cool. So the worker placement part of the game, I think, is where this thing shines.
We've used the term worker placement a couple of times already, and there's some people that are cringing out there to say, hey, you can't block most of these spaces. It's not worker placement. To me, it is. I know there's a lot of debate out there, but my apologies to anybody who we just triggered by calling that. What's interesting to me is, like you said, it's really simple. You can just put it anywhere and get your resources. And I think when this game first starts, especially with people that know, are familiar with the game and know how to play it, turns are just going boom, boom, boom. Everybody knows what they want until the first time somebody rounds somebody up. And you're like, okay, you just changed everything I had in my plan, and now it's on, right? You just gather my guys, and I'm going to gather your guys, and then there's this little sub game within the game, just making sure that nobody's getting too powerful, while at the same time you're trying to accomplish your goals as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I know my favorite part about this game too is that virtue track. Something where I always try to tend to go on the dark side and see if I can pull off a victory. I feel like it's a little bit tougher because the right cards sometimes have to come out, that is in the marketplace and stuff like that. But I like the fact that, it's very thematic, and the fact that, if I become too unvirtuous, then I can't build in the cathedral. So it's kind of one of those things where, when I play this game normally, I try to build a couple things in the cathedral, knowing that I'm probably going to go to the dark side as fast as I can.
But even though you can't build the cathedral, other things maybe start to get a little cheaper. You can go to the black market without as much penalty, things like
Correct.
that. And so I had written down here that David always goes dark, and he always goes down on the virtue track. But you have to have things work out for you, because there are ways to get back out there. But if those things don't come out, you can really hurt yourself.
Yes, I would agree with that, but it's fun. I mean, I just think that it's something, especially because I teach this game to a lot of newer players, as far as, teaching them mechanics and stuff like that in board games. And so for me, I a lot of times I take it as a challenge. Can I show them how to play a game where, most of them at the table are going to do, most of the same things. They're going to try to build into the chapel. They're going to try to do all this stuff, the cathedral. And nobody kind of wants to go on the dark side. So I kind of try to show them, hey, we could play the same game and it could still be close by going totally different routes. And I think that's something, if you're not into modern board gaming, that you'll come to appreciate it, is that there's just different and multiple ways to win. And I think that's why a lot of us are in this hobby, is because we like games that you could do different things and you could still have, a close kind of victory. You don't just have to go down one formula all the time.
Yeah, one of the other things that's really cool about the game is, in order to build, the different buildings that you might pick up along the way, you're buying all these resources and using those to build these buildings. But in order to build them, there's some prerequisites. Sometimes you have to have the right workers to be able to build the building that you have. So I think there's 3 different kinds. There's a woodworker, there's a stonemason, and
Painters, I think.
Painters, yeah. And you need to have those cards before you can do the next step as building. So you can't just get all your resources and then, build something. You have to actually work your way up, and there's a progression to get to that point to make those buildings.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit later about a little bit of my frustration on that too. You mentioned you need the right apprentices in order to be able to build those, and sometimes they don't really cycle out as fast as I'd like to see that happen. Although I do know there's some variants out there, but we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah, I mean, Chris mentioned this earlier too about the rounding up. I think that's exactly what kind of Chris was saying. That's kind of where the game actually begins. It's like, hey, I'm going to come here, I'm going to be nice, and then somebody does that first action like Chris was saying, and they round up some of these people. And normally the look of, like, why would you do that to me, comes across their face. And that's when the game's actually afoot. Some people, they try not to round up people. And you can play the game that way. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can play it. But I definitely like putting people in jail, because every time we put them in jail, you get money for that.
That's a great way to get money. Yeah.
I know. It's fun times.
Absolutely. And the other way to get money is to steal the taxes. And I don't know why, but it feels so good. If maybe nobody's paying attention, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, there's just so much money in there. I got to steal it. And then usually everybody else is like, I was going to steal it at the same time. And we play a lot of this game at 5 people, and you gotta steal it at the right time, or it's not coming back to you potentially.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely like a push your luck mechanic. Will it come back to me? Does somebody else in front of me? Do they all need something else? Versus what I'm gonna do here, especially if they have 3 or 4 workers built up on a spot. Especially for that gold and brick area. Are they gonna just it's like, let me just put one more guy there so I can get 3 gold, and then somebody will just round up your 5 dudes.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to say, I know you guys think it's all fun and games capturing my guys, but sometimes I think that doing that capture isn't really worth the effort sometimes, because it takes you a lot of moves to do it. You have to go, and number one, you got to take one of your workers, go to the location where you can actually round those up. You got to spend some money, and then you can go to the one location and grab one group of workers. If you have multiple workers already there, you can do 2 actions, because that gives you the benefit of doing that, but you still have to pay another coin. So you've already invested 2 workers to maybe grab 4 of somebody and maybe 2 of another. So you're down money, and then you got to take another turn to actually go to the prison and drop them off. So now you've already spent 3 workers, you drop them off at the prison, and you get, maybe 6 or 7 coins, but you're only up 4 coins and you're out 3 workers. So I think there's a part of the game where you really need everybody to be involved and keep everybody in check. And I think that's one of the things that, I guess I'm not going to say it's a negative, but I sometimes feel like that doesn't work all the time. It is a good way to get some coins, but when you start, you're scratching for every bit of coin you can get and every kind of resource, and every action I take to stop you from doing something is an action that Chris is going to be able to do something else.
Yeah, it has to be balanced, and that can be a downside. If you're the only one policing all the other players, then it's a screwed game for you. It has to be even. Other people need to be looking at it, because it does take sometimes. I think if you use it at the right time and you find the right time to execute that, it can be advantageous to you, but you can't be constantly doing it. It's got to be even across the table.
Yeah, I know I've played games before where, you got somebody at the gold mine or the brick mine, and, somebody's got 5 workers out there, and hey, why don't you round them up? And, I don't want to do it, because again, I want to keep progressing my job, my plan, and you're trying to do some negotiation and trying to encourage somebody else to maybe take bite that bullet for you.
If someone's not rounding them up, just start rounding that person up then, and try to get them involved.
Yeah.
Or just punish them one way or the other. The other thing I like about this game, and again, we often play with 5 at the table. I think this game gets better the more people you have on it. I've played it with, I think, 3, 4, and 5. I've not played it at 2. I feel like maybe, Pete, you have, and it's probably a very, very different game at 2.
Yeah, I've played it at 2 with our other friend Dave quite a bit, and with two people, it's really tricky because, like I said, there's only me to police somebody else. And what I found helpful is they do have an automa that you can actually play, and it acts like a third player, and it has some intelligence built in where it's going to go after whatever has the most out there. Sometimes it'll do the roundup, other times it'll do different things based upon what flips on that card. So that does make it better. And I think we even played with 3 players and included that as well. And this is a game that really shines. The more players you have, the better it is. I know we're talking the base game has 5 players, but I do know the expansion can bring it up to 6.
Yeah, have we ever played it with 6? I'm trying to think of that one game night we played or not. We might have done it the one time. But
yeah.
I've played so I probably enjoyed it. I like it too. But again, a lot of times with more players, I worry about, okay, it's going to get really frustrating when I get blocked and I'm going to be sitting there with a frustrated look on my face. That doesn't happen here for the most part. There's a couple spaces that you can get blocked from, but for the most part, you can keep going. And it's just more interaction that you can have to potentially, again, to your advantage, the more players you have.
Yeah, I will say another thing for those of you who are, wondering, does this game play, well at 5, since we have a lot of experience with this game at 5. I want to say the time frame, I've been just looking at my play history here with this game. Most games, even with 5 players, it takes about an hour and 10 minutes. It's a really kind of just around an hour game. I don't know, at lesser player counts if it plays a little bit less time than that. But I will say if you're looking for a 5-player game, if you're, because it's kind of a interesting player count, right? That's why we're the 5th meeple. But if if you're looking for something that plays in about an hour, you could always whip this one out and get it done in about an hour.
Yeah, this game never overstays its welcome. And sometimes it's even like, wow, that went maybe a little too, I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. But usually there's a reason that happened, and hey, you got to deal with that, and that's actually can be fun too to see. Okay, this game's about to end because it's you're filling up the guild hall spaces, and you can see when that time's coming, and I may only have one more round here, and then the pressure really starts to tighten up, and you say, okay, but I got to take some chances here or get things done.
Yeah, one of the things that at a higher player count too, you can really get caught. When the black market resets, if you're not ready, 2 people can do a build right before you. And next thing you know, you're in jail and you're the one getting all the, losing the points, and you got more guys in there than anybody else. So you're taking, negative points.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say here about this game is I think there's something like 497 games in this whole series or something like that, but they do a really good job of keeping consistent iconography throughout the games. And so if you played one game in this series, you don't know everything. You're not going to know everything you see, but you're not starting from zero. And it's relatively easy to be able to say, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that from the other game. And so you can pick up the other games in the series or in the adjacent series relatively quickly. I think that's really cool the way they've done that. What about things that didn't quite hit the mark for you? Any frustrations with the game?
I mean, Chris alluded to this earlier, but I think the game just ends way too fast. I know, it's like, oh, we could play it in an hour, but every time you build a building, you're losing a worker, but you're placing a guy up there. And at a 5-player count, those spaces go really fast. I mean, I know half the time, I'm getting building cards. And I'm like, oh, I could do this and this. And I feel like I never in a 5-player game get to the buildings that I actually want to build, just because there's somebody doing like buildings that don't require as many resources. And so they're just kind of like pushing end game, even if they don't realize it. A lot of times, I am playing this with first time players. A lot of times they're not realizing, that they're pushing end game every time they build something. Just because it's cheap doesn't always mean it's the best card to play. But I think as an experienced player, sometimes you get frustrated with that because you're like, well, are you really building that when you could
getting 3 points for yourself?
Exactly. So then you have to play that kind of same game, and it kind of can throw you off. I will say that, I just wish it went a little bit longer, which is probably a good thing for the game too.
Yeah, it's not wrong, but I agree that is a less fun version of the game. I like a little mix, because if everybody's sitting there trying to build a big 14, 16-point buildings, it's not really great either. But I like a mix as opposed to it's like, oh my gosh, this game's almost over. We just got started.
Yeah, Danielle's not here to defend herself, but no.
Exactly. Try not to say her name.
Yeah, I would say the other thing that I like in other games, and when we start talking about the next game, is just how many resources you can actually have. One of the things that they have in the game is the little tiles with the number 5. So if you run out of resources or there's not available, you never really run out, and you can keep gathering and gathering and gathering resources over and over and really not build anything until the very end. If you time it right, as you said, you can really get somebody at the end, and just the next 4 turns, you're just building. And that's the one thing I know it's part of the game, and I know it's a strategy, but that's just one thing that I don't like about it.
I mentioned earlier about the apprentices, and I just feel like they don't cycle fast enough. And again, I know there's a variant out there. Maybe it's in an expansion or something that to cycle those apprentices, and maybe it's just the way we play. But because I also feel like the black market doesn't seem to get used anywhere near or recycle and switch over. There's so many cards down there, and we never get more than a couple cards through the deck. And I feel like maybe that means that we're just playing it very differently than people do. But it just seems like those two things just don't quite cycle fast enough to give me additional options that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I almost wish that, because I play a lot to the dark side on this game, I almost wish that there was like a separate apprentice track that was more geared towards like, hey, here are these 2 that we have, and they're kind of like people that are like going to be good apprentices. But then there's like this dark kind of alleyway that you can go down and, kind of, it's more seedy, but then there's a better opportunity maybe to see some of the cards that you actually need to come out to make it sometimes more competitive. Because I agree with Chris. A lot of times you don't see a lot of the black market cards flipping as much as cards that they give you. So,
yeah, one of the things, and we really didn't get into it because we don't talk about the expansion too much. We've been playing the base game, but I do know there is the expansion called Artisans, and that really does kind of shift the focus a little bit to those apprentices. It kind of gives you a bonus, so you play that you play another card and you slide it under, and it really kind of doubles that action on that apprentice. So I think that's one way that maybe that would force people to maybe grab those apprentice cards a little bit more, because you can make them a little bit more powerful. I quite haven't played with it. I know I've watched a number of reviews on it. It's in my box ready to go, sleeved up. But every time I've done the teach, we just kind of left them out because it's a lot base game.
I wouldn't mind trying that, because I guess the other thing I have written down here as a note is I do feel that the game does get somewhat repetitive after a while. If I play it a couple of times in a row, it starts to feel samey, and then I'll have to put it back on the shelf, and I'll get it out eventually. But if I play it more than a couple of times, I'm probably putting it back on the shelf relatively quickly, because things just kind of tend to go the same way in every game. And maybe that expansion helps to shift the focus, bring it out every once in a while, don't play with it another time, to kind of help me with replayability.
Yeah, it'd be nice to try it out.
Yeah. All right, David, let's head over to the collector's corner. How does Architects hold up for cost and value?
Yeah, so right now on Amazon, it's going for $44.97 as of today, but I wouldn't actually go there to buy it. You could actually buy a new copy with free shipping on eBay for $34.99. So if you're looking, sometimes shop eBay. It's not always the cheapest, but in this case, it's quite cheaper than that. But, if you go on Board Game Geek, which you can see the secondhand market over there, you can get this game right now somewhere between 15 and I want to say $25 on that. That's before shipping. So you're still going to have to factor that in. But, the value that I kind of get out of Architects, at $45 almost is what it's going on Amazon. And I kind of checked some other sites, and it's not as widely as available as it used to be. Because it used to be when this game came out, I used to see it everywhere. And, I'm just not seeing it. I checked a couple of our local board game stores, and they don't have it in stock. So, maybe it's justified in a $45 price point. I don't know if I would personally pay that. I think you can get this game for like somewhere around $25, and that's kind of more of a fair value for, I think, what you're getting out of the experience. But what are your guys' thoughts?
45 seems high to me. I think, knowing what I know about it, though, if I could get it for 35 all in, I think I'm happy with that.
Yeah, that seems to be the sweet spot for me, too.
Awesome. What about final thoughts, guys? Wrap this up here.
I like Architects of the West Kingdom. It is a good worker placement game. It's a great intro for new players. It's approachable. I play it often. I know I'm looking at my counts here. I've played 15 times at least. So it's a good game.
Yeah, I think for this game, personally, I'm a little bit maybe more burned down on it. Maybe that's why I keep going to the dark side when I play it now, just to see if I can find another path to victory. But I do teach this game a lot when I do have new players, especially just trying to teach them a little bit about, game mechanics. I think this one, has some universal mechanics you can teach, very easily, and they can see it and then utilize that in other games. So I do like Architects. I think for me, it's starting to fade a little bit, I guess. But like Chris said, like sometimes I'll put it back on the shelf and then I'll pull it back out and I'll still have a lot of fun with it, especially if I have new players around. I mean, I always enjoy that. So going over to Chris.
Yeah, I really like Architects. I don't think I put it up there with my favorite games, and I'm probably not asking for it as much, but if someone's pulling it out, I'm more than willing to sit down at that game. I think it's a really good game for someone that's starting to get into the hobby and wants to try something a little more in depth. This is a really great game to, again, introduce those concepts, but they're not as punishing.
Yes.
You can explore a lot of different things. It's a really good game for that. So I enjoy it. I think even better, again, like I said, at higher player counts, really great game to get out and still have a really fast moving game. So shoot, David, what is... Shoot, we're about to get rounded up and taken off to prison. We'll see you guys on the inside to talk about Lockup, a role player tale. Lockup, a role-player tale, is a 1 to 5 player worker placement and area majority game that tosses you into prison, leading a squadron of minions in a quest to become the toughest gang in the gulag. Your current sentence lasts 6 rounds. Each round, players take turns assigning any number of crew members to one of 7 areas, with 2 crew members being placed face down if desired. Each crew member has a strength value, and at the end of the round, each player's crew strength in each area is compared to the others. Players earn resources or other benefits based on their relative strength, and if you're not one of the privileged few in an area, it's off to the library for you. In some cases, holding the majority in an area will also cause you to gain suspicion, brought about by goons that you can hire for special benefits. Of course, if you have your lookout in that area, suspicion falls to the next unlucky crew. Players can then spend their resources to craft various items for additional benefits. And finally, any crew that find themselves in the library can better their chances in life, or at least in the game, by reviewing the various tomes available there. As suspicion mounts, the guards eventually reach their limit and execute a raid, costing the most suspicious crews to lose valuable reputation. After 6 rounds, players combine reputation points from their goons, items, unused tomes, various in-game goals, and extra resources. The player who has built the highest reputation earns the king's respect and is released into the Colosseum. Lockup, a role-player tale, was designed by Stanislav Kordonsky and was published in 2019 by Thunderworks Games. Wow, guys. From building glorious structures for the king to being thrown into the slammer, we are now in Lockup, a role-player tale, so we're in the clink with a bunch of other monsters, trying to establish ourselves as the most powerful crew. When you're not trading candy for smokes, what are some of your best moments in Lockup?
I mean, for me, it's the deduction part of this game. I'm kind of a sucker. I think I've been playing a lot more deduction games lately, and just, the take that when you're placing down your little grunts or your goons out onto the board, every round you can place 2 of them face down, so nobody else knows what it is. The other ones you have to play face up, so there's that kind of mix that, there's some knowledge that's out there, but there's also hidden knowledge, and I'm starting to like that a lot more in games that I'm playing. I like the surprise of when we get to flip up the tiles and actually see what somebody put down. I like that, it has that exciting moment that happens where it's like, okay, what did Chris actually put behind this, or what did Pete actually put behind, as a 3 showing, what's the other number? Am I going to win this battle or am I not? And just that little bit of extra thinkiness of that puzzle, for me, is really satisfying. But yeah, that's some of my best moments with this game. How about you, Pete?
Yeah, I mentioned before, I love worker placement, and this one's really cool. Just for those things that you just said, you're placing these workers down. They have different values, so based upon that value is whether you're going to win or lose or come out somewhere in between. And that hidden information is really tough to figure out. Do I put my first few workers to face down so nobody knows what I have left? Or do I just come straight out and say, all right, well, here's my best guy, number 5. I'm gonna go for this thing and force somebody to actually do more if they want to get that spot. So that's kind of cool. And then the other thing too is, I may play 2 workers at one time, and Chris plays 1, and David plays another 1, and I play 2 more. And by the time it comes around to me, I'm out of workers, and these 2 guys are, battling out for, well, now they're really being very strategic and trying to figure out, well, where can I really take advantage of now? What's the candy that I can just grab and take away. So that's a really neat action that, this worker placement has.
It's really interesting how just a simple thing like I'm going to hide the value of one of my workers or two of my, how different that makes the game than if they were all placed up front. And then you start getting suspicious. Oh, he's putting his bully out there, and oh no, he's probably putting a 2 out there or something like that. And there's a lot in that game that just starts running through your mind. You try to figure it out, and inevitably, half the time it's wrong. And screws up your whole thing. It's funny, Dave won the last game we played, but the number of times he said, well, you just screwed up my whole plan. Well, I think it must have worked out for him because he ended up winning the game. But it is interesting. And I tried this last game to say, okay, I think I'm going to win there. But if I don't, how's it going to work out elsewhere? And how can I find that balance? I think I did okay at it, but a lot of times it just, that tiny bit of hidden information just really puts a lot into that game.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I just think it's so satisfying. Like, sometimes when you get somebody else's right and you're like, I knew that what they were going to put a 3 there, that was their hidden one, and you have a 4, it feels really good. But then at the same time, it goes against you sometimes, and it feels not as great. So, I think that's just fun. I mean, that's what I'm looking for, I think, more and more in games is just those moments of, like, highs and lows, but within the game itself, just making me feel something sometimes instead of just blah.
Yeah, the other interesting thing about that is, okay, you're looking at who has the most power in a given area to know who gets the resources from that. But if there's a tie, then it's broken by, well, who's closest to the player who has the first player marker. But you resolve these areas in order, and the very first area you resolve could change who has that first player marker. And so you try to build this plan that either says, well, okay, maybe no one will take it, or you're betting that, I mean, David, you take that first player marker every time. I was lucky enough to be sitting to your right in the last game we played. I was taking advantage of that, betting on the fact that I'm going to win I'm going to be on the wrong side of it, which is advantageous to certain areas too. So that's interesting too, how you build a plan and then it just changes right after that first room.
Being the first player, there's a plus side to it and then there's a downside to it. Yeah, you win tiebreakers, but you're also acting last. Or I should say you're acting first and somebody else gets to act last, which is really powerful because you're making the last move and you can really do something. The other thing that's really cool is when you do go to that library, there's a number of different cards that actually kind of break the rules a little bit, which, if you get some good cards, you can pull off some tricks. I know this last game that we played, it was kind of good. I was able to move one of my workers. I was able to snag the first player marker from David and, boost up one of my goons. And, he didn't see it coming. So that's kind of cool that, going to the library when you go to these sites and you don't win first and you don't win last and you're kind of in between, you end up going to the library, but there can be some really powerful cards that you get from that. So you don't always feel like, well, you're just straight out lost.
Yeah, I think those tome cards can be really powerful and really fun. They can also be really damaging when someone, it's hard enough to figure out how should I put my players there. When you think, okay, I finally got to figure it out. And then Pete whips out this, I can just move my guy from one room to another and just throw it all into oblivion. Again, hurts at the time, but it's also a really fun part of the game to where you thought you had to figure it out and everything just went to heck.
Yeah, I'm pretty negative on those tomb cards. I don't really appreciate them.
I don't know. I think they're pretty interesting.
I didn't even get any, no. Yeah. I mean, the game that I was playing was definitely a power game, so I very rarely saw a tomb card in this game, so it can be frustrating.
So that's another interesting thing in this game. One member of your crew is called the Enforcer, and he starts out with a strength of 1. And if you're playing with some of the advanced modes, he may start out a little bit differently, but basically there's this thing called power cubes. And however many power cubes you have, that's how strong your Enforcer is. And so as you go through the game, you may have this one member of your crew that's getting stronger and stronger and could be much stronger than or much weaker than the same Enforcer for another person. And that really changes the game significantly when you're trying to balance it out. And I know, David, again, you try to go that power route. Hasn't worked out all that well for you, but it can be really powerful at times.
Yeah, I think that the negative of going the power route, if you guys are out there and trying to do it, is just that it puts a big target on your back, even if your scores aren't very great. So, just because everybody is noticing that, because it's always the first action, the red cubes look really nice on your board, but everybody kind of sees the bling on there, where other cards like, Chris might have, or Dave might be collecting items. Chris has a bunch of other goons that are scoring in points, and I don't even notice the cards on his board because they're just so blah, So, I definitely feel that, but yeah, you can play different games in here, and that's what I like about it, though. I went the power route this time, didn't work out, but you could play, an item game, you can play the goon, collect goons and stuff, and there's a lot of different things you can do and still get to victory.
Yeah, the last game that we played, everybody was doing different strategies. I know, David, you were doing the power thing. Our buddy Dave, he was just going with the items. He was just grabbing all the items, and he didn't have any goons at all. I was trying to do a little bit of everything and doing it not well. So I did struggle in this last game getting resources. I know, David, you had a struggle for that as well, and it ended up showing in my score. But that's the nice thing about it. You can kind of shift and pivot a little bit. I know I looked over at your tableau over there, Chris, and the next thing I knew, you had like seven goons in there that were all of the. I
had the seven dwarfs.
The seven dwarfs.
I had the seven dwarfs by the time we were done.
Yeah, I was looking for Cinderella over there with it.
And I usually don't go the goon
White.
route. I usually don't go the goon route when we're playing this, but it just fell to me where I got a couple of goons early, or I got a couple of dwarves early, and it was like, and they just kept coming out. And there were a lot of cards left, but for some reason the dwarves just kept coming out. And once I realized that, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take advantage of that, because when you get to a higher number of those get really powerful. When I was just looking and saying, I can get as much out of these goons as I do out of the items, I'm going that route this round.
You know, another positive I have about this game is that what I say about a lot of worker placements games is that if you never feel like you have enough workers to kind of go out on spaces on the board, you kind of are always just like one short, or like you're like, I wish I just had one or two extra guys. I always think that's a great sign of a great worker placement game, in my opinion. So, you know, this game has that for me. I'm always like, I just wish I just had one more guy, or maybe, you know, just, you know, how I can manipulate it. And you're always just that one person short, or even the one resource. You know, I think there's a couple times where it's like, just was one resource short from buying something. And it's just all that kind of tension that kind of builds up. But it does it in such a way where I think great worker placement games and just great games in general have those moments that you're like, if I just had that one more thing.
It's every single round where you're saying, I just need that one extra worker. Or you get everything you wanted to do, and you got all the cubes, and now I'm ready to go and craft that item, and you realize I didn't put anybody in the cell block, and so I can't craft any items, even though I'm sitting here with everything I need. And it's frustrating and wonderful at the same time. Again, I agree. It's really well balanced in that way.
I like the way that the game really flows. You place all your workers out, and then we go through we go into lights out phase, where we start going around, and you start at number 1 and 2 and 3, and you actually kind of work your way through the board. And I think the board is actually really cool, the way that it's designed. I like the 3D look of it, and it's just very easy to follow that flow. You kind of go around and pick up those resources as you're going along, and you can use those resources later in that round to actually buy the things that you need to, or craft the items, which is really, really a great design, because, you know, I'm trying to think that I'm going to win these areas and have the cubes that I need to craft that item, and then all of a sudden everybody jumps on the one spot where I thought I was going to get, you know, my 2 gray cubes that I needed, and now all of a sudden everybody needs gray cubes. But then, you know, by the time it comes to the time to craft the items, I'm one short, and that can be a little frustrating, but that's part of the game. And I think trying to plan for that, or at least mitigate that a little bit, is a really great design.
Yeah, and it's really agonizing. One of the things we haven't talked about, once you put a worker in an area, you can't put any workers in that area in a future turn. And to see you have this plan, and then someone just jumps in there, and you're like, I can't do anything about that. You just hosed me, and I just got to take it, right? Which I guess, hey, that's prison. Sometimes it's better to just take it and let it roll. So, which, by the way, is another thing I really like about this game is I appreciate the theme. I don't know if there's many prison-themed games out there. There's probably a few, but then this is monsters in a prison, and I think it's a really fun, whimsical theme that works really well for what it is.
I think the last thing that I would say about the positives of the game is I think it scales fairly well, too. I know we played it at 5 players, again, very, very tight. And I think also a lower player count, they scale that back. And I know for like a 2-player game, you flip the board over, and it keeps it tight still. So I think that's one of the benefits of the game. I do like games that have the double-sided boards. I think that's a feature that you can really take advantage of, especially, you know, even if it just changes up the game a little bit, it just gives you all that flexibility. So I do appreciate that in the game.
Yeah, I mean, other positives that I have, you know, because I play the game I feel like a lot, is that there's just different advanced modes. Like there's an advanced mode to the game. So if you do, we played it on base mode. We have played the advanced mode though before, but it just adds like, asymmetric player powers when you start the game, which, I start to tend to like. I used to not, but now I'm starting to trend to like that. There's just a lot you can do after you kind of master the, basic thing. There are built-in stuff. You don't have to necessarily buy an expansion. We played with an expansion, but there's just stuff in the box already just to make the game advanced. Just like, turning over the player board. It's a totally, different, same guy, different powers. And now I'm set, me and Chris, we have different characters, and stuff like that. So I do appreciate that there's an advanced mode and a basic mode.
Yeah, and I think when you get into asymmetric powers, there is a risk sometimes if they don't balance it well that it can maybe not break the game but hurt it. But I haven't seen that here. When asymmetric powers are done well, I agree. That's a really nice way to make replayability increase.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Anything about Lockup that broke the law for you? Are there things about the game that drive you stir crazy?
If you play with, a new player or even an experienced player, there can be points at this game where you do have a little bit of AP. Especially as the rounds get later. So there's only 6 rounds, but I know, being the leadoff player, because I was going to power route, I try to not to have AP in most games I play, but I was struggling a little bit when I had to go first on some of these choices, especially in the later rounds like 5 and 6, because, where you place your guy, like Chris was saying earlier, you can't get that guy back and you can't go there again. So, being the first lead on that, I think I struggled sometimes in this game with some AP, and I'm not prone to it. So I think if you have people that are prone to it, you could run into some issues just because there is hidden information. So people might take it and try to really kind of math it out versus just playing the game.
Yeah, it's so much easier to go later in the player order than earlier. And when I'm sitting there also, I'm sitting there saying, and I got to be careful how I play it, because if on my first turn, even if I'm in towards the end of that, if I play 2 pieces instead of 1, if I play 2 crew members instead of 1, all of a sudden I'm going to find myself behind again. And yeah, it can be really difficult, and you just sitting there staring at the board going, I don't know what to do here, knowing you're going to screw it up.
Yeah. And for AP, for those you don't know, it's analysis paralysis, just in case.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time, looking at the board and trying to figure out what I'm doing. And sometimes I'm just really hemming and hawing on what should I do. And, I'm sitting right in the middle, and it can be, I don't want to say the word frustrating, but it's just difficult to make a decision. And sometimes you just got to say, you know what, I'm going to put it down and I'm going to see what's going to happen. Maybe I can mitigate, my screw ups that I did to start.
And you got to be willing to sacrifice something and say, okay, in order to be able to get what I want, I'm going to have to not get potentially something else. And if you don't do that and try to play the middle, what you get is a bunch of reading, which is still only going to get you 1 book out of the library.
Yeah, near the end of the game, the last game that we played, I did end up starting to throw down 2 workers at the same time, and just because I really needed those resources just to craft 1 item. And that was the other thing too. I don't know if it was different than the last game, but I really felt like I only crafted 3 items, and I know there's 6 turns or 6 rounds, but I didn't feel like I built up a whole lot. But then when I looked at the game, I ended up kind of dead in the middle of where everybody's at. And so, I did well. I didn't do as well as I wanted to, but I think, you can try to come up with a good plan. And again, it may just not work out for you.
Yeah, I think it's not just the item, how many items, it's which ones. And yeah, if you don't get that engine rolling, you can get behind and potentially tough to catch up.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because if somebody else doesn't have a plan, a lot of times what happens is they're going to throw, their goon or, not their group, one of their crew members into a spot that, maybe, doesn't matter to them, but it mattered to you. And so because they did that, even if somebody doesn't know, what they're doing. I think my brother was playing with us this game. Sometimes he was throwing stuff in there and I'm like, really that? I don't even think he knew what he was doing sometimes, and he just did it, which props to him because he beat me by a point. But, at the same time, I'm like, but it's all good.
Yeah, I've also got an issue with the guards because they do those raids at the most inopportune times, at least for me. We had this last game we played, we had 2 raids that come out. I got burned on both of them. But I think that's a really important part of the game. So I'm kind of saying that with tongue in cheek. That's obviously an important part of the game. I tried to play it the right way, but the first one I knew was coming. The second one I made some mistakes about where I was putting my lookout, and I got tons of suspicion, and I just got to the point where there was nothing I could do about it. And I got hit with 16 points lost, and I lost the game by 3. And so those raids really hurt me. And I thought I had a plan at one point on how to get rid of some of that suspicion, and I played one crew member wrong, and the whole plan just fell apart. And all of a sudden, I got suspicion out the wazoo.
Yeah, I think I played a little bit too conservative initially in the beginning of the game, and I was doing everything I could not to get suspicion, and it really didn't matter, because again, only the top 2 people get it, and I think I sacrificed some resources and things where I could have probably taken that suspicion along and gotten some extra cubes for it.
All right, let's take Lockup into the collector's corner. David, does this game make bail?
Yeah, so right now on Amazon, you can find this game for around $47. It's like $47.92. It's a really weird price going on Amazon. I looked at eBay prices really quick because I like to check them just as a secondary source, and I saw that the game was moving anywhere between around $25 to $40. It was what it was priced at currently. A lot of the games, though, sometimes they were going for like $70, but it included the expansion. So I think that's still a good deal if you want the expansion. I know we didn't talk about it as much on here, but it does help loosen up the game a little bit. It gives you like an extra worker, and it feels like there's a little bit more spots. It's not as tight. So if you're looking just to loosen it up just a little bit, you probably should consider the expansion on this game. As far as price, value in my head, I think you can get this game if you're looking used, which we're talking always about on here. I think this game is going to average somewhere between like 30 and $40 used. Again, I looked at, is it widely available at our local game stores? And it's not. So, coming in 2019, it's not as easy to find as it used to be. Again, maybe that's what's driving up the price a little bit, but you should be able to get a copy still if you really want it for somewhere around 30 to $40. I think if you see it out there for around $30, it's probably a good deal. You should jump on it.
And I can see where some people might get this game and then just decide, okay, this is not for me. And so there are probably sellers out there that are just looking to offload it. Yeah. But again, it's not as popular a game, so not as many. But I can see where this game, for a lot of people, will be just like, yeah, that's not my kind of game either. Any final thoughts from you guys?
I mean, my final thought on this game is, I just looked at player time, like how much time it takes for us to play through a game. And I saw, the games I was playing without the expansion, they were around 90 minutes. And then games with the expansion were about 2.5. So it's like 2.5 hours. So you're looking at almost a whole nother hour if you play with the expansion. And I think that, the thing I like about the game, though, is I still don't feel like it's one of those games where when I'm playing it, I'm like, this game is taking forever. I always feel like, I don't notice that time going by. So it was just interesting to note that when we play without the expansion, it's about an hour shorter on average with 5 players. So.
Which is interesting because something we didn't talk about was downtime. And there is a decent amount of downtime in Lockup. But usually when it's not my turn, I'm sitting here either calculating or saying, oh, what is he going to play? And really interested in what everybody else is going to do. And so that downtime, at least for me, doesn't always feel like downtime.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Chris.
Yeah, and Lockup for me, I think it's a really good game. It's probably not for everybody, but I'm surprised it's not more popular than it seems to be because I really enjoy this game. I think if it sounded interesting to you, I would suggest you try to find it. You're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I think this game isn't for everybody. I think you got to have the right kind of group of people to play it. You have to be willing to fight a little bit for that position and be okay that you lose. So I think that's one of the things about the game that you really got to keep in mind if you're going to try this out.
All right, guys, sounds like visiting hours are over and a riot is about to start. Let's go see what the fuss is all about in our Battle of the Funnest. All right, everyone, the moment of truth has arrived. It's time to separate the men from the boys, or more appropriately, the games from the toys. We're pitting these games head-to-head against each other in the ultimate face-off. In one corner, weighing in at 2.75 out of 5, with an overall BGG rating of 7.7, controlling the cathedral like Quasimodo, capable of turning clay to gold with a single worker, always virtuous, never in debt, the King's Cornerstone, architects of the West Kingdom. In the other corner, weighing in at 2.43 out of 5, with an overall BGG rating of 7.4, Rescued from solitary in 2019, the brightest brother in the brig, the prime principal of prison, the coolest cookie in the cooler, the baddest mamma jamma in the slamma, Lockup, a role-player tale. And now let's find out which one takes the top placement in our Battle of the Funnest Showdown. Okay, guys, you know how this works. We're going to evaluate these games head-to-head in 5 different categories: theme and production, mechanisms, value for your time, replayability, and the fun factor. We'll each choose which game we think outdoes the other, and the game that gets the most votes wins the category. The game that wins the most categories takes the prize in our Battle of the Funnest. So let's get to it. Starting with theme and production, I'm going to Pete.
All right. Theme and production for me, I really like Lockup over Architects of the West Kingdom. It's a very unique theme. I think the production of the actual game is really, really good. I like the layout of the board. Just really fun game. David, what do you think?
Yeah. Oh, man. I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one, Pete. I actually like the Architect's theme on this one. I feel like it really comes out when I think of theme and production. When I try to play kind of on the evil side, it feels that way. Like I can't do certain things, but I can like rob the taxman, or I can get, certain things like that. And I do like that. I feel like I'm very much like trying to play a character that's either good or evil sometimes when I play that game. And so for that immersion, I'm going to take it over Lockup. So to Chris, break the tie.
Yeah, I think both of these games do well with incorporating their theme and letting you feel like, yeah, you are actually playing the type of game that the theme's supposed to be. Lockup's going to take it for me for 2 reasons. Number one, production. I think, Pete, you mentioned earlier the 3D art of the board is really neat, but also when you have your crew, you hide them from other people by putting them in what from your side just looks like a Scrabble tile holder. But from the other people's side, what they see are your crew looking out through bars. And it's a small thing, but I think, okay, they thought this out. That's so cool. And then the other thing would just be, while they both represent their theme really well, I think that these monsters in prison is just a really cool theme as well. So it's definitely Lockup for me, which means Lockup takes theme and production. Let's move on to mechanisms, and I'll go to you, David, first.
Yeah, so mechanisms for me, I'm going to go with Lockup on this one. I just really like the kind of hidden aspect, not full information. There's something hidden, and I just can't, get away from that. I think the more I play games, the more I'm looking for, something that's unique in that genre or that mechanism, and I feel like I find it here with Lockup. So that's what I'm going to pick on this one. I'll send it over to Pete.
Yeah, David, we're on the wrong side of the fence again. I'm going to go with Architects of the West Kingdom for mechanisms. I think there's just so many different options as you can do in Architects. You mentioned before about going to the tax stand. You can be a bad guy. There's the cards that you got to buy in order to build the different buildings or the cathedral. You're capturing people and throwing them into jail. There's a lot of different things that you can do in Architects versus Lockup, where you're putting the hidden items down, or fighting over those spots. And for me, it's just there's more mechanisms in Architects, I believe. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, so once again, I get to break the tie, and I'm going to go with David this time. I think it's Lockup. I think they both do well with their mechanisms, but I feel like when I look at Architects, mechanisms that are used in Architects are used in a lot of different games. Not to say that Lockup is super unique, but there are just a couple of things. Again, I talked about already, the simple thing of you can put 2 of your guys out there upside down. It just so cleverly, very simply changes the whole game. And I really like that. The other thing is, I think the way the different rooms, you have to balance it out. Architects, you can kind of do whatever you want, go wherever you want. Lockup, you're really thinking about, what am I going to do? What am I not going to do? And I really appreciated that in that game. So Lockup on mechanisms takes that as well, 2-1. They are now up 2-0 on categories. It's time for Architects to make a run if they're going to make it. We're going to go to value for your time, and I'm going to get them off on the right foot, because I think Architects takes value for your time probably by a long shot. We mentioned earlier the game can go really fast. I still think you get a lot out of it for that, and you are constantly doing something in Architects because there's not much time between your turns for the way it's designed. It's Architects for me. I'm going to go to David.
Okay, Chris, I think I'm going to be on the wrong side of you this time. I'm going to pick Lockup on this one. I just think that when I play both games, even though Architects plays fast, for whatever reason, when I play Lockup, it takes a while, I guess, that, when we look at the actual time, but when I actually replay it in my head, every time I hit the stop button on my timer, I just can't believe that it actually took that long. Because in my head, I'm like, hey, this game took like 45 minutes just because I'm enjoying every minute of the game. Where Architect, sometimes I'm not always enjoying every minute of that game. And so I think for my value for my time, I do get a lot more enjoyment out of just playing Lockup and just going through all the mechanisms and stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to choose on this one. I'm going to send it over to Pete to break the tie.
All right. Well, this time I'm going to go with Architects. Again, it's a quick game. I just feel like there's so many things that you can do. When I'm playing Lockup, I got my head down, and I agree with you that time goes by fast, but a lot of that time is just looking, staring at the board. I like the value of negotiating with other players to, try to do this or try to manipulate the board a little bit. There just seems to be more things to do. Value for me, Architects.
All right, Architects takes value for your time 2-1. Lockup, it still has the lead 2-1 in the battle for the funnest, but we're going to go on to replayability. I'm going to start this one as well. I'm going to go with Lockup. I think I could probably go either way, but I mentioned earlier that Architect starts to feel a little samey for me, and that's what's just in my head to say I got to keep that in mind when I rate this here. I'm going to go with Lockup, and I'll go to Pete.
Yeah, Chris, I agree with you on this one. Lockup, this game for me has more replayability. I think every time that I play it, it feels totally different. I can go one route. Again, we talked about, am I going for crafting components or am I, going for goons? And every game to me does feel different as well. When I do play Architects, again, it's a lot of the same thing. I'm going out, I'm grabbing resources, and I'm building stuff. So for me, I'm gonna stick with Lockup for replayability. David, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you both. We're going to clean sweep this one on replayability. I just think there's more ways you can win in this one. I've tried to win different ways in Architects, played it a bunch of times, and I feel like there's maybe a path that is a better way to play that game. Whereas with Lockup so far, I haven't found that path. I've seen a lot of different ways people have won this game, and it's not always the same. And, and I try new stuff all the time too, and sometimes I get close, and this last time it was a stinker, but to me, it's like, I'm always looking for how many different types of ways can you actually win a game, and are they all feasible? And I'm just finding more replayability right now in Lockup when I look at, how you can win the game.
All right, so Lockup sweeps replayability. The last category is fun factor. David, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think this one's probably a no-brainer if you've been listening to me now. I'm going to pick Lockup. At one time, Architects was really high on my list, but I think that the more I play the games, I actually think Lockup is probably maybe a game in my top 10 right now. So it's moved up that far on the list. I just like a lot of things it's doing. It's fitting a lot of my play taste right now. And so for those reasons, I'm going to go with Lockup. I'm going to send it over to Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Lockup as well. Either one of these is fun for me, but Lockup, again, it has some things in it that I just haven't been getting from other games. You can have a lot of fun with that theme as you're playing with each other, and again, just chucking them off to the library or getting a beat down, whatever. But we have a lot of fun every time we get this game out, so I have to go with Lockup. Pete, your opinion doesn't matter. What do you think?
Yeah, this is a close one for me on fun factor. There are two different kinds of fun to me. There is the fun that I'm just going out and, we're doing stuff and interacting with each other. And then there's the fun of the puzzle. And I think I got to agree with you guys. The puzzling part of Lockup and just working through what your moves are going to be, to me, is more fun than, again, just grabbing resources and building something. So I'm going to agree with you guys. Right with you there.
Cool.
All right, so Lockup wins the fun factor as well. And guys, I didn't necessarily see this coming, but sometimes when you go into prison, you don't really know what to expect. So, hey, there you have it, folks. A score of 4-1. Lockup, a role-player tale, takes out Architects of the West Kingdom, earning its place, taking the victory in this battle of the funnest. Well, I think that's going to bring us to the end of yet another episode of The Fifth Meeple. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want to get in touch with us again, email us at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com or give us a shout on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks for placing your trust in us. Thanks again, Pete, for filling in, and until next time, we hope you're always free to go where your heart desires. just making it hard on me today for the
You
editing.
can throw it back.
Sorry. Yeah, me too. You're going to get more and more reset. The
That's a good blooper. I don't know what that resource is.
Stop. Rewind.
Come on, I'm punning the crap out of this.
Oh. You can cut that out.
I probably will.
Thank you.
I'm going to cut pretty much half your stuff out, Pete. I mean,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please.
You said you wanted bloopers, right?
yeah, I got plenty now.
Yeah, they're all the same.
That's the bad part.
That's a visual I
Alone
didn't need.
alone in the shower, Pete. Yeah, think about that tonight, buddy.
I don't want to go to prison.
Yeah, somewhat thematic, right? That was terrible.